I had always loved McDonald's. As a kid, it was my favorite place to eat. I loved the fries, the burgers, and the milkshakes. But most of all, I loved the feeling of being happy and carefree. As I got older, I started to eat at McDonald's less and less. But there was something about the place that still drew me in. Maybe it was the nostalgia, or maybe it was just the smell of the food. One night, I was driving home from work when I decided to stop at McDonald's. I was hungry and tired, and I thought a Big Mac and some fries would be the perfect way to end my day. I pulled into the drive, through and ordered my food. The woman at the window was friendly and efficient. She took my payment and handed me my food. I drove home and parked in my driveway. I was about to open the bag of fries when I noticed something strange. The fries were covered in a strange black substance. I got out of the car and went to the back of my car to get a closer look. I picked up a fry and examined it. The black substance was sticky and gooey. It smelled like burnt rubber. I was disgusted, but I was also curious. What was this black substance? And why were the fries covered in it? I decided to take the fries back to McDonald's and ask the manager what was going on. I walked into the restaurant and went to the counter. The manager was a young man with a shaved head and a goatee. He was wearing a McDonald's uniform and a name tag that said Steve. "Excuse me," I said. "I ordered some fries in the drive-through, and they're covered in this black substance." Steve looked at me with a blank expression. "What black substance?" he asked. I handed him the bag of fries. He opened the bag and looked inside. His eyes widened in surprise. "What the hell is this?" he asked. I shrugged. "I don't know," I said, "but I'd like to know why it's on my fries." Steve took the bag of fries from me and went into the back of the restaurant. He came back a few minutes later with a man who looked to be in his 50s. The man was wearing a white lab coat and a pair of glasses. "This is our quality control inspector," Steve said. "He's going to take a look at your fries and see what's going on." The quality control inspector took the bag of fries from Steve and examined them. He sniffed the fries and then took a small bite. He spat it out immediately. "This is disgusting," he said. "I've never seen anything like it." He took the fries to the sink and washed them off. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but it's not edible." He threw the fries in the trash can. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," Steve said. "I'm going to give you a full refund." He gave me my money back and apologized again. I left the restaurant and drove home. I was shaken by the experience. I couldn't believe that McDonald's had served me fries that were covered in an unknown black substance. I decided to do some research on the black substance. I found a few articles online about black mold and other contaminants that can be found in food, but I couldn't find anything that matched the black substance on my fries. I'm still not sure what the black substance was, but I know one thing for sure. I'll never be eating at McDonald's again. I was 16 years old when I got my first job at McDonald's. I was excited to be working and to be making my own money. But I soon realized that working at McDonald's was not all it was cracked up to be. The hours were long, the pay was low, and the customers were often rude. But the worst part of the job was the manager, Mr. Johnson. He was a short, fat man with a bald head and a mean face. He was always yelling at the employees and making them do extra work. One night, I was working the closing shift with a few other employees. We were cleaning up the restaurant when Mr. Johnson came over to us. "You guys need to work faster," he said. "We need to get this place closed up." We were already working as fast as we could, but Mr. Johnson didn't care. He kept yelling at us and pushing us to work faster. I was starting to get frustrated. I looked at the other employees and I could see that they were frustrated too. "Mr. Johnson," I said, "we're working as fast as we can." Mr. Johnson glared at me. "You're not working fast enough," he said. "If you don't start working faster, I'm going to fire you." I was angry now. "You can't fire me," I said. "I've done nothing wrong." Mr. Johnson laughed. "Oh, but I can," he said. "I'm the manager here, and I can do whatever I want." I took a deep breath. I didn't want to get fired, but I didn't want to be treated like this either. "Fine," I said. "I'll work faster." I went back to work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Johnson was watching me. I kept glancing over my shoulder, and every time I did, I would see him staring at me. I was starting to feel uneasy. I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. Finally, the restaurant was closed up. We were all about to leave when Mr. Johnson called me over to him. "I need you to stay late and clean the kitchen," he said. I groaned. "But Mr. Johnson, I've already been working for 8 hours, I said. "I don't care," he said. "You're staying here until the kitchen is clean." I didn't have a choice. I had to stay. The other employees left, and I was alone with Mr. Johnson in kitchen. I started cleaning up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept glancing over at Mr. Johnson, and I could see that he was watching me. I was starting to get scared. I wanted to run away, but I knew that I couldn't. Finally, the kitchen was clean. I turned to Mr. Johnson and said, "I'm done." Mr. Johnson smiled. "Good job," he said. "Now, why don't you come with me to my office?" I didn't want to go, but I knew that I had to. I followed Mr. Johnson to his office. He closed the door behind us and locked it. I started to panic. "What do you want?" I asked. Mr. Johnson smiled. "I want you," he said. I took a step back. "No," I said. "I don't want you." Mr. Johnson started to walk towards me. "Oh, but you will," he said. I turned and ran for the door, but it was locked. I was trapped. Mr. Johnson grabbed me and pulled me close. He started to kiss me. I tried to fight him off, but he was too strong. He pushed me to the ground and started to unzip his pants. I screamed for help, but no one could hear me. I was terrified. I knew that I was going to be raped. I closed my eyes and waited for the worst to happen. But then, I heard a noise. I opened my eyes and saw Mr. Johnson stop what he was doing. He looked towards the door. The door opened and a police officer walked in. "Mr. Johnson," the police officer said, "you're under arrest." Mr. Johnson was handcuffed and taken away. I was safe. I sat on the ground, shaking and crying. The police officer helped me up and took me to the police station. I gave a statement to the police, and they charged Mr. Johnson with attempted. The police officer took me to the police station, where I gave a statement about what had happened. Mr. Johnson was charged with attempted rape and sexual assault. I was physically and emotionally shaken by the experience, but I was grateful to be alive. I knew that I had been lucky. Mr. Johnson could have easily hurt me or killed me. I went to therapy for a few months to help me deal with the trauma of what had happened. It took some time, but I eventually healed. I never went back to McDonald's after that night. I couldn't bear to go back to the place where I had been so badly hurt. But I never forgot what happened to me. I knew that Mr. Johnson was just one of many predators out there. And I knew that I had to do something to help other women avoid the same fate. I started a blog where I shared my story and offered advice to other women who had been victims of sexual assault. I also started speaking out against sexual violence and advocating for victims' rights. I knew that I couldn't change what had happened to me, but I could use my experience to help others. And that's what I'm determined to do. I was working the late shift at McDonald's one night. It was a slow night, and I was the only employee on the floor. I was cleaning up the dining room when I heard a noise from the kitchen. I went to investigate and saw a man standing in the shadows. He was tall and thin, with long dark hair. He was wearing a black hoodie and jeans. "Can I help you?" I asked. The man didn't say anything. He just stared at me. I started to feel uneasy. "Sir, you need to leave," I said. The man smiled. It was a cold, evil smile. "I don't think so," he said. He started to walk towards me. I backed away, but he kept coming closer. I turned and ran for the front door, but the man was faster. He grabbed me by the arm and pulled me back. "You're not going anywhere," he said. He dragged me into the kitchen and threw me to the ground. I hit my head on the floor and blacked out. When I woke up, I was tied up in the freezer. The man was standing over me, holding a knife. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to play a game," he said. He cut my ropes loose. "Now, walk," he said. I started walking forward, but I didn't know where I was going. I could hear the man laughing behind me. I tripped and fell. The man started laughing harder. "Get up," he said. "We're not done yet." I stood up and started walking again. I could hear the man's footsteps behind me. Suddenly, I felt something cold and sharp against my neck. It was the knife. "Stop," the man said. "You're getting too close." I stopped walking. I could feel the man's breath on my neck. "I told you this was the aim," he said, "and the game is over." I heard the man raise the knife. I closed my eyes and waited for the worst. But the pain never came. I opened my eyes and saw the man lying on the ground. A police officer was standing over him, holding a gun. The police officer untied me and took me to safety. The man was arrested and charged with attempted murder. I never saw the man again, but I'll never forget the night he tried to kill me. I started working at McDonald's when I was 16 years old. I was excited to have my first job. But I quickly realized that it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. The hours were long, the pay was low, and the customers were often rude. But the worst thing about the job was the stalker. I first noticed him a few weeks after I started working. He was a tall, thin man with long, dark hair and a beard. He always wore a black hoodie and jeans. He would come into the restaurant almost every night and sit at a table in the corner. He would just stare at me. I tried to ignore him, but it was hard. He made me feel uncomfortable. I started to feel anxious and paranoid every time he was in the restaurant. One night, I was working the closing shift with a few other employees. We were cleaning up the dining room when I saw the stalker standing in the doorway. He was staring at me. I quickly turned away and went back to work, but I could feel him watching me. I finished cleaning up and went to the back room to get ready to go home. I was alone in the back room when I heard a noise. I turned around and saw the stalker standing in the doorway. "Hello," he said. I froze in terror. I didn't know what to say. "I'm so happy to finally be alone with you," he said. He started to walk towards me. I backed away, but he kept coming closer. "I've been watching you for a long time," he said. "I know everything about you. I know where you live. I know where you go to school. I know where you work." I was shaking with fear. I didn't know what to do. "I'm going to take you home with me," he said, "and we're going to have a lot of fun." He reached out for me, but I dodged him and ran out of the back room. I ran down the street until I couldn't run anymore. I collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. I didn't know what to do. I was scared to go home. I sat on the ground for a long time, trying to calm down. I told my parents what had happened, and they called the police. The police took a report, but they said that there wasn't much they could do. I continued to work at McDonald's, but I was always looking over my shoulder. I was afraid that the stalker would come back. One night, I was working the closing shift again. I was in the back room, getting ready to go home, when I heard a noise. I turned around and saw the stalker standing in the doorway. I screamed and ran out of the back room. I ran through the kitchen and out the front door. I ran down the street, but the stalker was right behind me. He was gaining on me. I turned a corner and saw a police car coming. I waved my arms and shouted for help. The police car stopped and the officer got out. He saw the stalker chasing me and drew his gun. The stalker stopped running and raised his hands in the air. The police officer ordered him to drop the knife. The stalker dropped the knife and the police officer handcuffed him. The police officer took me to the police station and gave me a statement. The stalker was arrested and charged with attempted kidnapping. I never saw the stalker again. I'm still traumatized by what happened to me, but I'm grateful to be alive. I know that I was lucky. The stalker could have easily hurt me or killed me. I'm sharing my story to warn other women about the dangers of stalkers. If you are being stalked, please report it to the police. Don't wait until it's too late.